Greetings, everyone, and welcome to ION Africa. My name is Awasar. I'm Assistant Director for Academic Affairs at the African Studies Center here at Michigan State University. And ION Africa is our weekly seminary series. I'm very delighted today to have Matt Lindenberg to present for us. So before we start, a brief introduction. So Matt Lindenberg is the founder and executive director of the Global Conservation Corps, an international nonprofit organization committed to bridging the gap between people and wildlife. GCC's Future Rangers program reaches over 10,000 youth bordering the Kruger Park with a supporting education platform that is set to scale across the continent. Prior to establishing GCC, Matt worked at the Southern African Wildlife College for 6 years, serving as a field guide, field ranger trainer, community liaison officer, and logistic manager. Matt earned his Bachelor of Science in Geography and Zoology from the University of South Africa. He was subsequently awarded a scholarship to complete his Master of Science at Grand Valley State University, Michigan. His master's thesis saw Matt lead the reintroduction of 7 orphaned female cheetahs onto Northwest Namibian farmland with specific focus on survival rates and reproductive success. We're very glad to have you, Matt. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Awa. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining in. I can just see like 2 people here. So yeah, it's probably better that way. And if my mom's out there, how's it, mom? But cool, yeah, thanks everyone so much for attending this talk. With a title like this, I think you probably know you're in for a lot. I'm here in South Africa tonight, so it's 6 o'clock. So yeah, hopefully you've all at least had 1 cup of coffee and you're ready to dive deep into the story of what the rhino, the rangers, and the people of South Africa bordering the Kruger National Park are facing. I tried also to break up this presentation into a couple of stories as well, so it's not just bombarding you with statistics as well as doom and gloom, because it is quite a rough situation here on the ground and has been for quite some time. So to start things off, I'm going to talk about my absolute hero. This man's name is Martin Coetzee Mthembu. Martin was born in the Drakensberg mountain range of South Africa on the 16th of August, 1968. Martin was born the oldest of 8 children. And when he was rather young, his father passed away. And so it was up to Martin to become the breadwinner in his family. It was up to him to provide for his 7 siblings, his mom, his gran, and as the eldest, one of the few options that he had at the time during an apartheid South Africa, where as an African you had very limited rights, was to go and fight in the South African Defense Force. And so without too many options, Martin went and he did that, and he served in our South African Defense Force in the 32nd and the 111th Battalion, fighting for a country that didn't recognize his rights, his family rights, or his community's rights. But he believed in a brighter future for this country, and he put his life on the line along with many other brave men and women. And this is Martin up there on the border of Angola. Hello, there we go, sorry. I think Google Slides is losing its mind here. Sorry, folks. There we go. So in 1994, when South Africa got its independence, Martin left the military and he brought all of his military background, skills, and training into the conservation sector. And this is in Tanini, which is in one of our provinces in South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal, where Martin got his start as a ranger and ranger trainer. At this point in time, he really connected with the natural world, which is, what he loved doing as a child, and quickly became a reputable force in the ranger training world. You can quickly see just the amount of respect that Martin amassed from his trainees, his candidates. And yeah, you can just see as well, like how proud he was to be making a difference for the communities, especially the local communities of not just South Africa, but around Africa. Beautiful story here too. Martin saved up for over 10 years to pay the dowry for his wife, Simon Gele's hand in marriage. And they got married here in a place called Sentekau in both the Catholic Church and then also in the traditional Zulu tribal tradition. So very much a man of tradition, of family. He went on to have 5 children, and obviously here, just like the happiest man in the world. But Martin's career hadn't even begun yet. In the mid and late 90s, Martin started getting calls from governments, Tanzania, Angola, West Africa, to go and help them solve issues like elephant poaching, early days rhino poaching in Zimbabwe. And it's estimated that in Martin's career, he trained over 15,000 rangers across the continent of Africa. And if you think about a general ranger class size being 30 to 45 students, you can imagine how many classes he was able to touch in his amazing life. This is the only photo that I have with Martin taken 12 years ago. It's not my favorite photo, but it's got Martin in it. So that's what makes it really, really special to me. Here we are out training field rangers at the Southern African Wildlife College, which borders Kruger National Park. On this trip specifically, I think this picture was taken that early afternoon. Sorry, this is hilarious. Tom Cruise is in town here next to Kruger Park filming the new Mission Impossible. So that was his helicopter that just flew over. So yeah, everyone wants to be here. Yeah, so right after this picture was taken, Martin, myself, and this guy in the middle, Javi, we walked into 26 lions on foot with 18 rangers that had never seen lions before. Yeah, sorry guys, Tom Cruise is doing hot laps. You can't get enough of this place. There he goes. And during this moment in time, Martin got in between myself and a female lioness that charged. I'm convinced he saved my life. Martin also saved my life 2 other times, from another lion incident and then from a black mamba. So the reason why I bring him up, not only was he an absolute legend in the conservation space, but I owe this man my life 3 times over. He taught me a lot of different lessons during my time at the Wildlife College: integrity, loyalty, ethics. But most importantly, he helped shape the basis of my conservation understanding, which is truly all about the fact that if we want conservation, especially in the African context, to move forward, it has to involve the leadership, the ownership, and the direct benefits to the local communities that have been living in, around, and with this wildlife for thousands of years. And that's the legacy, the values that Martin instilled in me. Because unfortunately, on the 2nd of August, right before his 47th birthday, he passed away. It was a huge loss in the ranger community. Martin pioneered the ranger training selection program for Kruger National Park with a few other massive icons in the business. And at his memorial, there are now ranger guidelines that are dedicated to Martin's memory. There were royalty from Europe that called in to honor his name and his legacy, amongst a bunch of other African and traditional tribal chiefs and leaders. 15,000 rangers, 15,000 lives. Martin has directly been involved in keeping rhino, elephant, and other endangered species populations alive with his life and his legacy. So to dive into what Martin was fighting for, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at what we're dealing with at the moment. So you can see here, we've got 5 species of rhino across the world. We've got 3 across Asia and 2 species of rhino across Africa. These numbers, the Asian rhinos, the 3 over here, the greater one horn, the Sumatran, and the Javan, you can see are extremely critically endangered and under threat. But their population statistics and numbers are rather accurate. However, when you look at our black and white rhino estimates here across Africa, when talking to wildlife vets, experts in the field, conservationists that have been doing this for a long, long time, they feel that these numbers are extremely skewed. And estimates of white rhinos somewhere between 12 and 15,000 individuals, with black rhinos definitely below 5,000 individuals, according to experts in their opinions of these numbers. If anyone does have a weak stomach, or doesn't like graphic content, I would suggest maybe just close your eyes for the next 30 seconds, but it's imperative that we all just get a very, very deep and quick and almost invasive understanding of what our rhino populations are facing on a daily basis. So the next slide is going to be graphic. This is the face of it. This is the raw reality. I think a lot of South Africans and folks across Africa in this conservation space have gotten, unfortunately, quite jaded. because it's been going on since 2008, and as you'll learn quite soon, there have not been the desired and systemic solutions and changes that we need in order to turn this tide. It's estimated that every 8 hours across South Africa, a rhino still gets poached. Of course, those numbers fluctuate depending on seasons and years, but we've lost over 11,000 rhinos in Africa since 2008. And those are just the numbers that, of course, get reported. What drives rhino poaching? We're going to sort of touch on this as well, just so we understand some of the drivers behind this systematic deletion of these prehistoric creatures. So probably the two oldest beliefs or uses of rhino horn. In China, it's believed to be this elixir, right? That can cure you of many different ailments and diseases. It's old. The belief system for the use of rhino horn in China is thousands of years old. As well as in Yemen, when a man, or let's say a boy, becomes a man and has this rite of passage in prestigious families, they use the rhino horn as this jambia handle, which again has been in existence for quite some time. But the new uses of rhino horn coming on from around 2008, where in Vietnam, one of the leaders in power claimed that it cured, I believe it was his mom, of cancer. And for someone that's had both my parents have cancer and thank goodness beat it, if I knew that there was something that could cure my loved ones of dying a horrible, potentially really slow death, I would do it. The challenge is as well is that a lot of Vietnamese and Chinese individuals do not know that rhinos actually have to die, and in such brutal ways, to get this product. It's also a proposed aphrodisiac. I guess some folks need all the help they can get. So yeah, it's an absolute farce. And new ones as well. These poaching syndicates are extremely good marketers as well. So now they're marketing rhino horn similar to cocaine, where you can drink more. It helps you sort of give this extra energy and push through. And then the last thing that's really scary is that rhino horn is now been, not now, like in the last 10 plus years, it's been found in crime syndicates, houses and homes. Like we might aspire to have a Ferrari parked in our garage so we can say, hey, like, look how wealthy and prolific my business is. Same thing with rhino horn. Rhino horn fetches anywhere between 30 and 100,000 US dollars for a kilogram. Rhino horn can range from 4 to 6 kilograms. So at the height of the demand for rhino horn, you're looking at a $500,000 product with the death of one animal. So you can see we're up against a huge amount. These are the rhino poaching statistics that have been reported. So we talked about that number being around 11,000 since just around the turn of 2008. You can see the majority has been hit here in South Africa. South Africa is home to about 80% of the world's remaining rhinoceros populations. And so you can see we've been heavily targeted, with other African countries like Zimbabwe, Namibia, Kenya and Tanzania having some of those losses, but South Africa is absolutely the overwhelming target of these crime syndicates. How do these poachers do what they do? There's a huge difference as well. This isn't part of the presentation, but just to be clear with everyone, there's two very distinct types of poachers or illegal hunters. The first one is subsistence, which is for the pot. It's basically to feed your family. If you're living in a very poverty-stricken environment, that's to feed the family. But on the other side, you've got these commercial poachers, which certainly have enough food resources, and it's pure greed that's driving them. And that's what rhino poachers predominantly are folks that usually have enough and that are just driven to this by greed. But the technology that they have access to, drones, helicopters, night vision goggles, military grade technology that can really help get into parks, detect rhinos and get out with being caught. These poachers are extremely skilled. The majority of poachers in Kruger National Park, which has 40% of the world's remaining rhinos, it's got half of South Africa's rhinos. The majority of insurgents come across from the Mozambique border, and Mozambique had a 30-year civil war. And the individuals that are being recruited to come into Kruger National Park have a huge amount of military experience. They're also very specialized. So it's a three-man team. You've got normally someone extremely good at tracking down the rhinos, finding them, and they're carrying the axe. Then you've got someone in the middle that's got a semi-automatic weapon, and that is for encountering rangers, the law enforcement officers that protect rhinos. And then that third individual's got a heavy caliber weapon, like a 4.58 or a 3.75, which usually you can take out a rhino in one shot. And you can imagine if you hear a loud noise a couple of times, you know which direction it comes from. If you can kill a rhino in one shot, it's very hard to detect the direction where it comes from. Sorry for the birds. I definitely am in the bush here. Unlimited funding. When you think about up to $500,000 US for the death of one rhino, you can imagine the kind of funding that these individuals have. And with that kind of funding is corruption. We've had section rangers in the Kruger National Park being arrested. So again, folks that have an amazing salary, an amazing future, and that are actually on the inside of conservation have fallen susceptible to rhino poaching. And again, it's amounts of cash that people, unless they've got huge amounts of integrity, they've failed to say no. On the other side of things as well, intimidation is a huge one. I'm going to talk about a ranger quite soon. His name is Sergeant Anton Mzimba. And he's had multiple times where he gets a phone call from poaching syndicates and they say, Anton, if you go left on patrol today, we're going to shoot you. If you go right, you're going to be fine. We just want those rhinos. If he says, and he does say no, he's going to get another phone call, this time not about him, but about his family. And here it says, these criminals, these poachers say, if you don't go left on that patrol today, if you don't go right, stay out of our way. We know that your wife's doing the washing, your son's playing soccer, and your dog's barking. So that's the kind of pressure that these poaching syndicates are using up against very limited resources on the good side. Apologies for my really artistic endeavors here with my blue on photo. A couple proposed and relatively solid solutions to rhino poaching. I'd say relatively solid because we're still not winning the war. We still are looking for solutions because we still are losing 2 to 3 rhinos a day. The first one, you can actually see it here. This is a picture of a rhino horn poisoning where veterinarians will come in, they'll poison the horn to make it sort of redundant so people can't consume it and use it for medicine. And the other option around the horn, more of a direct conservation measure as well, is just dehorning that rhino. There's a lot of opinions on all of these approaches, so I'm not going to go into them. If anyone has a specific question, I've got a lot more qualified friends that could answer, is it right or wrong? These are just sort of the facts. Legalizing the trade. So since 1977, the international trade on rhino horn has been halted. It's illegal to trade rhino horn now since 1977. But there are proponents. There's a man called John Hume that lives in South Africa, and he's the largest private owner of rhinos in the world. He owns more than 1,500 rhinos, I believe. And his argument is to say that if we legalize the trade, we can supply that market and then use the funding to help protect wild rhinos. That's the reasoning. Demand reduction. There's an organization, an amazing organization, I'm sure you know them, called Wild Aid, and they use celebrity endorsement campaigns such as Jackie Chan, Yao Ming, Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, that do public service announcements on national television. The government of China has donated $500 million US in free advertising and marketing. And so Wild Aid really tries to do demand reduction by saying, this is your favorite celebrity, and Jackie Chan is against the use of rhino horn. So it's another really powerful, impactful way. The militarization of conservation. This is definitely a controversial one, right? It's definitely it's a hot topic, and definitely one which I think needs to be thought and discussed about a lot. If you look at these first 4 proposed solutions, a lot of these things are happening on the hardcore conservation side of things and specifically focused on the rhino. But the challenge here with all of these solutions is we're doing single species focused conservation. Whether or not we can or can't save the rhino, a lot of our other ecosystems and environments in the African context are under threat. And so things like improved policies for more of a blanket approach where you're protecting the entire ecosystem definitely has a bit more of a wider reaching net. The other idea of this militarization of conservation is that if you can protect one species, your most threatened species, which is in this case the rhino, you can protect all species. That's the theory. And then the last proposed solution is to continue allowing the use of hunting of rhinos and using, again, the revenue of those hunts. Some folks really appreciate shooting an animal that you can literally walk up to and shoot. Rhino is probably the most docile creature I've ever come across. And using the hunting to conserve these species. So those are some of the big proposed solutions that are out there, which have successes at varying extents, depending on the funding, the partners, the organizations. But to come back to this figure, we are still losing. Like, we can't deny we're still losing. And the sort of predictions by scientists keep going between, 5 and 10 years before there's more rhinos dying than rhinos being born. And once we hit that peak, that sort of point of no return almost, the rhino population really will not endure for much longer than that. We also don't see in this graph the genetics and how much genetic heterogeneity we are losing, and how important that is with the very, as we know, ever-changing climate and environment, where we need every single bit of genetic strength to help us adapt and help these rhinos adapt. So to zoom out a little bit, I want to switch gears. And again, I know we're going through a lot, but the situation is critical. And so to have all the facts is extremely important. And we're running out of time. So I'm trying to really give you as much context as you can. You can see here in where we are, like it's South Africa, and then you can see where Kruger National Park is. That's where all the nice hearts are on the map, because I'm extremely good with technology. So going over here to Kruger National Park and its history. Again, Kruger National Park, where I work with the Global Conservation Corps is based, has around, and the greater Kruger area, has around 40% of the world's rhinos. So just diving a bit into the history over here. It's established on the 31st of May, 1926. So it's coming up for its 100-year anniversary. It's massive. It's about the same size as Israel. And yeah, with I think 7 different unique ecosystems in it. So a massive biodiversity hotspot. When we're thinking about carbon sequestration, we're thinking about all sorts of ecological services that this park provides. It is immense. But just thinking about the history of Kruger as well, various tribes, especially the Shitsonga, the Shangani tribe, has been inhabiting the Kruger National Park for a very long time. But in 1948, with the adoption of the Nationalist Party and the apartheid governmental regime and focused, I think by now we all know apartheid means separate. There was complete black and white segregation in South Africa. It was decided by the government at the time that forcible removals of local communities needed to start happening in the Kruger Park, because it was identified as a tourist destination, a holiday destination. And so there was this massive removal of indigenous communities from these areas. The Numbi region in the south, it's roughly where it started in 1956, with over 1,000 community members that were removed outside of the park's borders. And it continued in a northwards trajectory up until the Makuleke community was removed right at the end of the 60s. In 1994, we got our democracy in South Africa. Governments changed hands, and we really started to think about a more equitable future for all, to which some of these indigenous communities that had been living in the Kruger Park for hundreds of years started to file land claims, to lay claim to where their ancestors, some of them even their grandfathers and grandmothers, had been born. But things are not nearly as easy as it looks. This photograph for me speaks 1,000 words, and this is the harsh reality of what conservation looks like in South Africa, especially around the Kruger Park area. You've got this massive 21-strand electric game fence, which is to equally keep people out as well as to keep wildlife in. And along the Kruger National Park border, which running north to south is 360 kilometers long, about 200 miles, you've got at least 3.4 million people, the majority of which are living in like really substandard conditions, living in poverty, where tourism is one of the only drivers of economic stability in the region. But you can imagine that for 3.4 million people, it's extremely hard to provide every single human being jobs in this industry. Prior to COVID, the unemployment rate in the 2 provinces that border Kruger National Park, Limpopo and Mpumalanga, collectively around 35%. We don't know how accurate those are, but estimates and assumptions through COVID is that unemployment skyrocketed well above 50%. again, going back to those statistics we talked about, where you've got something like a rhino, which is worth up to $100,000 per kilogram, right across this fence. And you've got folks that have got, you know, inequality, the inability to skills, education, and employment. It's extremely appealing to head over that fence to try and feed your families, or for, let's say, the greedy, to try and fund your wealth. So who's inside the fence? Who protects the rhinos? And who's holding the line for us while we wait and make up our minds as to what we're going to do? Rangers buy us time, but it's what we do with that time that counts. This is the man I talked about, Mr./Sergeant Anton Mzimba. Anton's been a ranger for over 30 years, and Anton is between him and Martin, the primary drivers of helping to open up our eyes as an organization as to how we could do things differently. Now, this picture paints 1,000 words, and you can see what it means to someone like Anton to be involved every single day, risking his life. Let's just talk about what these rangers face really quickly. Rangers are some of the lowest paid professionals in the world. They live in the bush, so when it rains, they're wet. When it's hot, they sweat. When mosquitoes are out, they don't sleep. Obviously, they live in malaria areas, things like snakes, scorpions, spiders, but they're also in a big five environment, so potentially dangerous animals. They don't see their families sometimes for up to 6 weeks at a time, so they very rarely get to spend quality time with their families on a consistent basis. And on top of all of that, they're getting targeted by poaching syndicates and putting their lives on the line every single day. In the last 10 years, we've lost 1,000 rangers across the world. So that's one ranger every 3 days dies on the front lines of conservation, ensuring that folks like us can go into these protected areas, have our game drives and our safaris and our gins and tonics. And no one ever says, well, let's say very few people ever say thank you to these incredible men and women on the front lines. This moment over here was pivotal for myself and for our organization, the Global Conservation Corps. During this interview and this photo shoot, Anton was on the border of tears, and it wasn't because another rhino had been lost. It was because he opened up to the fact that his very own children had never seen wildlife before. They hadn't come into the reserve, especially his youngest son, Grant, who at the time was 6 years old, and hadn't seen a rhino. That was his greatest fear. And that greatest fear was made really apparent to us when we started to do some research and started to do some digging and understanding what Anton's greatest fear was all about. And we found that about 4 out of 5 students that border the Kruger National Park, when we did our survey back in 2017, had never seen wildlife before. They might be able to hear the lions roaring at night. They might hear their grandparents talk about when they would graze their cattle with buffalo in Kruger before all of these fences went up, but they don't have access. And I think we can all agree, if we don't love something or understand something, we won't protect it. And on top of that, if we don't benefit from that thing, if it doesn't pay, it won't stay. And so that's where things started to change for us. And let's say our eyes as an organization started to open up, where we really pivoted and started to dive deep in helping to identify, build, and develop the next generation of conservation, local conservation leaders. We took Anton out on an awesome game drive with his dad. We saw hyenas, we saw elephants, and I'm going to finish off with this later on, but after 7 long years, we've just finished making our feature-length documentary called Rhino Man, which is about Martin, Anton, and the future of South African rangers and what it's all about. And this scene is a little screen grab from that film. So these moments, these really special moments, learning from mentors and heroes like Martin and Anton, have really helped formulate the base of GCC's programs and our interventions. There's so many incredible organizations across South Africa and beyond that are doing the most phenomenal, intense, focused work in the field inside that conservation fence. But there's a lot less funding, support, and resources going into the development of the people that literally hold the future of African conservation in their hands, and they live right next door. So our 3 focuses, we've got a short-term focus, which is supporting rangers. That's our short-term focus. We have to continue supporting the rangers, because if there weren't any rangers, we'd have no wildlife left to talk about. But our two biggest focuses here are our Future Rangers program, which, don't let the name mislead you, not every single student in our program is going to become a law enforcement officer. It's more about becoming a custodian of our planet. It's becoming a leader, an ambassador, and a change maker in local communities to be qualified and in a place of decision-making power. And on the right-hand side, we've got something which is about 2.5 years old. It's called the Inspiration Engine, which is all around creating local content to inspire that next generation to find their own careers in conservation. Now, I hope there's a couple of social scientists in the mix tonight, because this will probably speak a lot of sense to you. We've got these 3 impact pathways that we're extremely passionate about, thinking of it from a very high level perspective. We've got values. First and foremost, we need to develop the values that communities, especially youth, have around wildlife. Things like empathy, love, passion need to be developed at extremely young ages. I think we all know that. If we think back to our earliest memories of wildlife, if we've been fortunate enough to have those, that's where the impact is at the greatest, because you're a sponge, you're susceptible to the sheer beauty of nature. Benefits, again, if it doesn't pay, it won't stay. We need to ensure that we can actually channel all of the passion and the love and then the skills into actual benefits, into employment, putting food on the table, and at the same time deriving passion and love from what you do. And the last impact pathway that we're extremely passionate and dedicated to is scale. As you saw before, rhinos are under huge amounts of threat, but elephants, lions, pangolins, birds, down to the soil and the grass that we have in places like the Kruger National Park are under threat. So everything we touch, we want it to have immense scale and impact across the ecosystems that we focus on. Here's our GCC institutional theory of change. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but you can see our 3 impact pathways in yellow. I think I'm colorblind really badly, so I think that's yellow. We've got the blue, which are assumptions or our outcomes, like the change that we want to see happen over time, which leads us to our vision and mission, the green on the right, which is all about those restorative, regenerative relationships between people and wildlife. And then in the orange, these all of our different strategies and interventions, our conservation interventions that we feel are going to help move the needle and move more local youth into leadership positions in this greater wildlife economy. So let me walk you through the pipeline. And yeah, hopefully everyone's got enough coffee. We're definitely now in the final third of the presentation. The first thing we really have to do is instill these values. At the moment, like I mentioned in the beginning, we're fortunate enough to reach over 10,000 students on a weekly basis with our facilitators. We've got an all-female facilitator staff that come from the local communities that speak Xitsonga, the local language of these youth, and that very quickly become more than just teachers and facilitators. They become role models and they become mentors, they become icons. And role models is a thing that we'll touch on in a little bit, but extremely, extremely important. So once the lessons have been taught in the classroom, let's say more of the traditional, the conversations, the games, the activities, the fun, we try to supplement this as well. This is during the height of COVID-19 when access to schools was severely reduced. We fundraised for a digital learning platform where we could take a mobile classroom out into the communities, to the schools. And while the rest of the world, especially let's say the global north, the developing countries, were moving forward with digital literacy, it was imperative that our communities and our youth did not fall behind as we all shifted to more of a digital world. And so you can see here at Matlakisana Primary School, where we're bringing not just digital literacy, but computer skills and really immersing our students in the way of the world in the 21st century. Role models is a huge thing. Think about it from this perspective. When the local youth here switch on the TV, almost always it's a film from the United States with individuals that they can barely maybe understand or identify with. And so with our team, it's really imperative that our staff are not just amazing facilitators, but also incredible role models that have the ability to inspire the youth, and that youth can see themselves represented in leaders. This is Mboni Mzamani, who's leading up our educational side and is also the producer and host of Careers in Conservation. So role models is a very, very hard thing to find, but I think we all, thinking back to our childhood, we all aspire to find heroes and people we can believe in. That's why movies like, I don't know, Rocky are the classics, because it's always the underdog that you can believe in and get behind, because we all need something to believe in. We have to get youth outside. We can talk about conservation inside a classroom, but if we don't get youth into nature to connect, to smell, to see, to feel, taste, and touch what nature is all about, we've completely missed the mark. And so here we are with some of our partners at And Beyond and the Southern African Wildlife College, taking students for their first time on game drives, on safaris, to go and see these iconic African species, elephants, lions, buffaloes, leopards. Here we got to see one of the 3 white lions that are existing in Kruger National Park, which is incredibly rare. And I think you can tell how stoked everyone was from this day. Besides these game drives, we do other, let's say, really immersive experiences with the students. So visiting wildlife rehabilitation centers, planting trees, community service days, and really getting that hands-on experience. I think that's the best way for most of us to learn, is to get involved and to get our hands dirty. As students progress and move more into the high school sides of things, we run skill building opportunities and workshops, not just for the youth, but for their teachers as well. So we're starting to, you can see here's an 8th grade curriculum that we funded in partnership with Africa Foundation to bring the teachers, principals, and then some of these older students and help them to become mentors and advocates for conservation. Again, a really happy picture. I think I have the best job in the world. Once our students qualify and get through high school, one of our goals is to expand our scholarship program. Again, it's all well and good to build the passion and the exposure and some of these entry-level skills, but in order for individuals to qualify and enter into that job market, they have to have qualifications, certificates, training. Here we are at the Southern African Wildlife College. We ran this during the height of COVID. None of us are wearing masks, obviously. Yeah, no one's wearing a mask. But this was a field ranger scholarship. We've run multiple different types of scholarships for different career pathways in conservation. This was during the height of COVID, where there was a need in the landscape for rangers, for young rangers coming through the ranks. And you can see on the bottom right next to me here, this lady is called Aniki, and she comes from the Timbavati Private Nature Reserve, same as where Anton, who was holding the horn, comes from. And she was one of the first qualified women as a field ranger through our program. And she's now also gone through a canine handling program and is starting to show incredible leadership capabilities in her department at the neighboring reserve. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about, is local employment, leadership, and the ability for talents, for passion, for incredible potential to shine through. It's actually, to be honest, like quite emotional and quite like a privilege to be able to show you this picture, because these are 3 of the most amazing team members that I get to call colleagues. Got Mboni on the left, Lefa and Promise. They've all come through different aspects and components of GCC's pipeline. They all are employed by GCC. Mboni, again, runs our Careers in Conservation series and also oversees our educational impact. And then Lefa and Promise are both our star facilitators that each reach about 2,000 students a week. So they have immense impact. And I hope very soon that it's one of them or all of them presenting this presentation to an audience like from Michigan State University, because this really is the face of what African leadership and conservation looks like. All these 3 individuals are from the local communities. As children, they heard lions roaring, they heard the rumors of elephants breaking down fences, but now they're the ones inside and outside the park, inspiring that next generation of youth, that they also have their place in the world, especially in conservation. The last couple of things I'll talk about here is back to scale. So GCC seeks to create scale on 2 very, very large levels. The first one is with our learning platform, the Future Rangers app. Now, to get a bit of an understanding around the problem or the challenges we're trying to address with this app. Historically, what would happen, let's say USAID would write a $10,000 grant and it would send let's say maybe 200 students on a safari, on a game drive. But what will happen is, you're going to check a few boxes, you're going to get a few photos, all the kids are on a game drive, maybe you saw some wildlife, boxes ticked, grant is done, we call it a success. But in reality, what actually happens to those students? Those students might have had experiences on that day, but also with other conservation organizations. But is there any proof of what they've done? And how can students use those experiences to apply for bursaries, scholarships, and eventual employment if they cannot actually show an employer or an interviewer what they've done? And so we found this huge need and issue, let's say challenge in the marketplace. And so we've built this Future Rangers app. We now have 4 scaling partners that can plug in this app to their existing programs. And now individual youth are able to build up, let's call it their conservation LinkedIns. So when they graduate, they matriculate from high school, they've got this massive portfolio of evidence that they can use to say, I'm the one, I'm deserving of this scholarship, this mentorship opportunity. I've got all of this proof, and I'm backed up, I'm validated by the mentors, facilitators, and teachers that log my information in. This app also has a massive offline curriculum library. So there is so much amazing curriculum in conservation, but there's historically been a lot of ring fencing, and a lot of folks are protective, not just around funding, but their curriculum as well. And so GCC is really trying to foster a collaborative approach where we, initiate these conversations and onboard partners. And the agreement is, if you want to use our app, like a service as a software, you have to also donate your curriculum under a Creative Commons license. So that way, when you teach a lesson or a program in a school, you've got access to this massive repertoire of curriculum. And at the end of the day, it's for the benefit of the youth. They've got access to even more curriculum. We are looking to take this to around 100,000 students across 6 African countries in the next 18 months. We've got 3 amazing scaling partners and 1 we've just brought on board, and we're looking for global impact. Especially now talking to, I can't see who's on the call, I'm guessing at least 1 person from Michigan State. I lived in Michigan for 3 years. I went to Grand Valley State University on the west side. And I came across tons of kids that had never been to Lake Michigan, right? They heard stories, sometimes they could see seagulls, but they've never actually been to the Great Lakes. And so what I'm getting at is this app has got a global application. It's all about connecting youth to the natural world, but then being able to record it and monitor that change over time. The last thing I'll say about the app, I talk about it for days, but I'm trying to tone it down, is that it also monitors the skills. So as certain students progress through different programs, the facilitators can log certain qualitative and quantitative markers, metadata to those names. So we could start, we're using the National Geographic Learning Framework. So we're looking at knowledge, skills, and attitude. And as certain students start to find their aptitude and their passion for certain careers in conservation or even the greater wildlife economy, we can log those skills to those students, helping fast track them to not just like a decent job, but something that they're really passionate about. It's a huge problem in conservation, is that folks, especially entry-level jobs, are taking those positions because it's a job. And again, when you've got a rhino that's potentially worth $500,000 US, we need to have the most passionate people in these leadership positions to ensure that our wildlife survives. The other side of our scale is this inspiration engine we previously touched on. Again, it's about uplifting marginalized voices, creating local heroes with local content. So if you go to YouTube and you really want to see what this is all about, it's called Careers in Conservation. And we've got 10 pilot episodes starring Mboni, who's obviously our host here in the front. And he's interviewing local heroes in that conservation space in the local language that are involved in a variety of different careers. You've got Precious on the right. She's a canine handler. You see Mboni dressed up in a canine suit. He definitely got her workout in with that dog. Talking to rangers, helicopter pilots. We've got chefs. We've got the first African man to summit Mount Everest. We've got amazing content, but again, it's all aimed at the youth and allowing them to see themselves in these leadership positions. Because when we ask students, what can you be in conservation? We get 3 answers and that's it. You can be a guide, you can be a ranger, or you can work in hospitality if you're a woman. And that is completely unacceptable. So we're using this media to open up youth's minds and perceptions of what is possible. I'm going to skip to Voices of Nature. So we've actually got 2 podcasts. Things happen quickly around here. We're on Spotify and Apple Music. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, Voices of Nature interviews folks from around the world that are passionate about making a difference, whether it's in the luxury watch industry, for example, all the way through to using equestrian therapy to help folks heal through trauma. We've got the most amazing interviewees on their podcast. We also have the Rhino Man podcast, which goes much deeper into the voices of the men and women on the front lines of conservation. Speaking about Rhino Man, I'm doing a shameless plug because after 7 long years, we just released and launched our poster for the film yesterday. The goal of Rhino Man is to raise awareness for rangers on a global scale. When we started this film 7 years ago, there was very, very little awareness and recognition to rangers. You might have seen the movie like Virunga, which really did a great job of putting rangers on the map. And this is our goal with Rhino Man, is not only to put rangers on the map, but to help drive a very impactful social impact campaign, where at the end of the film, anyone that watches from around the world can do a couple of steps to have their voice be heard and to drive impact on an extremely large scale. And yeah, you can go to the Rhino Man website, learn a little bit more. And our goal also is a Netflix or an Amazon platform distribution deal by the end of the year. So if you like rhinos, rangers, and a little bit of what you heard about today, please stay tuned. To sort of bring it back full circle, I always struggle to try and find the final slide, the final message, the final takeaway. But with a mentor like Martin and Tembu, it's extremely easy to bring it back around full circle. Martin was one man, born in a country that didn't recognize him as a citizen. He was born without, he wasn't born in the lap of luxury. He was born into a really oppressive society. But over the course of his 46 years, he was able to change countless lives with the belief that local youth and local populations were the true answer and the true future of what African conservation looks like and needs to be. And so I hope that as we wrap up this call, somewhere out there in the universe, Martin's sort of looking back and can be a little bit proud of the amazing GCC team that I showed you tonight, because they really are like phenomenal heroes. Every single day interacting with students or fighting rhino poaching or sharing this message around the world. It's all about ensuring that Martin's legacy continues and that both people and wildlife have a place on this planet. And I think that if Martin can impact 15,000 people, 15,000 families with his life, I think that, yeah, we've got no reason to not believe that we also have a huge part to play ourselves. And yeah, there's huge and immense impact that we can make as one human being on this planet. So yeah, I thank you all for your time, and would love if there's any questions or yeah, any things we'd love to talk about in more detail. I'm here. I know we've gone through a lot, but again, this is an extremely urgent situation with wildlife and people's lives on the line. And I think it's time that we really address the fact that wildlife and conservation is it needs to be a people-focused solution. The wildlife's going to be okay. If we can take care of the people, the wildlife's going to be fine, but the answers lie with the people. And I'd love that to be the greatest takeaway. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt, for a very beautiful and important topic. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A section. You can also raise your hands to speak. So this is time for the question and answers. And while we wait, I guess, Matt, my question is, how you're doing great things, and what do you think will happen, let's say, in the next 5-10 years? What impact will your organization have? I know you focus on people, but also on the rhinos. Are the numbers go up or?
I mean, I have to believe that those populations are going to go up. Actually, a really cool story that I heard about extremely recently, from one of our board advisors, Mr. Ernest Glati, who's one of the principals of a school that borders Kruger National Park. He told me that a couple of weeks ago, he found out through the grapevine, as we have it here, that there were poachers in his community that had come in, I believe, from Mozambique, and that were starting to like find information from the local community members as to where the rhinos were, how to get in. Well, students that are in our program got wind of this information, alerted the police, and those poachers got arrested. So it's, yeah, even if it's not in 5 years, it's super cool to know, to have that affirmation that students that, you know, have been impacted by our programming and partner programming, because there's so many amazing organizations in this landscape, that students who literally, they don't have anything really tangible to gain right now. They're still students, but they felt so compassionate and motivated that they put their safety on the line by ratting out these poachers. So that's happening right now. And I would love to see that more as things move forward with GCC, is just really trying to help catalyze the incredible talent and skills that this continent has. I'd love to see this app being scaled to countries on a governmental level, where governments could contract us out and say, look, we'd love to bring our youth, our communities, and our natural resources closer together, and GCC could help bridge that gap. It feels like we're on the precipice of moving forward. We had an amazing engagement with IBM, and IBM has helped us really expand and develop this learning platform for youth. And so I think if we can just keep partnering with organizations at that level to help us bring this technology to as many students and youth as we can, I feel like we can turn the tide on this war, where your fence isn't those 21 steel strands. Your fence is your community, because there's direct benefits and access and compassion for that wildlife, but there has to be benefits and access. So yeah, I hope that answers it somewhat.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Emmanuel?
Yes, please.
Yeah, go ahead. You can ask your question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Matt, for your presentation. Even though I joined late, overheard you said that you're planning within 18 months to extend your GCC team action work throughout some, I don't know if it is 6 African countries. I wish to know which of these countries will be your priority, and if in case my country is involved, because I'm in Cameroon, I also like to be part of your team. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Great question. And I'll shoot you my email so we can chat a bit more offline. But yeah, great question. So the 6 current countries we've got identified through one of our largest scaling partner. We've got Botswana, we've got the 2 East African focal countries, so Kenya and Tanzania, and then we've got Botswana, Mozambique, and Namibia. So those are the ones we've identified right now. We're also talking to the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, as well as a few private organizations in Zambia. So, but Cameroon would be a phenomenal expansion goal. So I'll shoot you my email here so we can connect offline afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, Emmanuel, I can't see your private name. I'm just going to put it here, and if anyone wants questions, concerns, complaints afterwards, more than welcome to to shoot me an email.
All right.
I'm going to put it publicly. Cool. Okay, that should come through. Thanks, Emmanuel.
Thank you. So you have some comments on the chat, but I don't see any questions.
Yeah, I think it's.
And if somebody is wondering where the recording will be, it will be posted on our YouTube channel. If you go to our website, africamsu.edu, Iron Africa, you can find it there.
Brilliant. Yeah, and thanks for all the nice comments, team. I really appreciate it. And yeah, yeah, Renee, super cool. You've been to Uganda. Like, yeah, just really lovely comments coming through. And yeah, just happy to be a messenger here, and hopefully, yeah, spread a little bit more information about the amazing folks doing. So many good people on the ground doing great here. So thanks everyone for listening. It's been fun, and hopefully, yeah, hopefully you get some time to digest this because it's been a lot.
Okay, so if you don't have questions and comments, we thank you very much, Matt. This was eye-opening. I guess we're gonna listen to it again, and I don't know, what would you like people to do?
Yeah, if anyone's interested, a couple of things. You could go to the globalconservationcorps.org website and just sign up for our newsletter if you'd like to stay updated with all of our programs. We released our monthly newsletter today, but once a month you get a newsletter that comes out just across the board with all of our developments and news from our amazing team on the ground. We also have like a really fun social media selection of channels. Instagram's definitely our biggest, and in this crazy world that we live in, if you're just looking for some really feel-good wildlife and youth stories, you can just find us there at the Global Conservation Corps. So yeah, just stay informed. And of course, my email is now in this little chat box. So any other questions, I'm here and available. That's what it's all about, is just growing the network and making sure that we can keep telling these stories and be aware. That's the first step.
Thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate you coming and sharing. Thank you, everybody, for coming too. We'll see you next time. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Alan. Bye, everyone.
Bye.